La crematissima. No, tistica. Tistica. Hello and welcome to a new episode, actually a new sub-series, La Crematissima or Crematistica, with me, Francis Peck. So you might be thinking that this has something to do with the lovely crema you saw there in the beginning of the clip, and of course there is a relationship. Crema is of course the most fabulous thing to enjoy as a coffee enthusiast, no matter what James Hoffmann might claim about it. But in this context, it actually comes from a different place, and that's Aristotle's Politics. Last year, when I was reading, I guess it was called La Politica in Italian. So, because I am, of course, familiar with this work, but I guess I was reading it in an English translation before, but I saw this topic being discussed, La Crematistica. And so what is, trying to get my head around it. So in the English translation they call it the art of acquisition, and it's part of economy. Now you need to know that economy back in Aristotle's time, and actually if I'm not mistaken he coined that kind of concept, was having to manage your household, making ends meet month by month, year by year, leading you to self-sufficiency, let's say, at different levels, individual, a household, and then also a polis, right? That's why, whether you like politics or not, but we're all politicians. Now, in the past, I actually consciously decided not to discuss politics, although I kind of already had an exception a good half year ago when I outed myself, let's say, as a green, blue political spectrum person with very strong green feelings. They're stronger because I just through my studies I know where the world is going, and also for coffee, and so that's part of what I'm sharing on this journey on YouTube. But I decided to focus on critical thinking, or having a channel on coffee and critical thinking, where you can be as critical as you want about the things I am saying. Actually, it's not that everything I say I'm personally 100% sure about. I just go from it statement to statement, and I try to have it as authentic as possible. That's actually why I avoid doing too many edits, and you get to see the thought process as it arises in my mind. In 2025 a lot has already happened, and Aristotle is really one of my favorite philosophers. That's already a few decades like that for me, and this book has just such huge relevance. Well, always it has, I guess, since it came out a good 2000 and a half years ago. So what I'm now going to do is just read a little bit about what is this art of acquisition. So for the people following on the reference system of the Aristotle corpus, that would be 1258, and then that's B9. Okay. We have now discussed sufficiently that part of our subject which is related to pure knowledge. So, luckily, we're stepping aside from pure knowledge. We're going somewhere more practical, I guess. It remains to consider the part which is related to actual use. Politics does have, real implications in the end. All subjects of this nature may be treated liberally in theory, but have to be handled in practice as circumstances demand. The parts of the art of acquisition which are of actual use are the following. The first is an experience of farm stock. This involves knowing which are the most profitable breeds and on what soil and with what treatment they will give us the greatest profit. So just a small comment. So one way of acquiring things useful for your household is of course farming, and then having knowledge about the kind of breeds. Like in the garden we're researching the Robusta breeds, knowing that the climate is changing and the area where Arabica can grow is shrinking. It's kind of considered a species at risk, Coffea arabica. So if you like coffee, follow this channel to know where we're headed and what options you'll have in the future for your daily cup of coffee. But here is kind of discussing one way of acquiring. And so, what are the most profitable breeds, and what kind of soil? You can follow in another sub-series the crop source investigations or coffee source investigations sub-series, where we're actually analyzing post factum. So where did they actually grow this, rather than what's the good soil to grow it on. A lot of the experiments we're currently doing is on very nutrient deficient grounds in Congo, and where we're already getting robustas with nice flavors. I've personally tried some of them, so I can vouch for that. And knowing that the soils have difficulties there, it can only get better, basically. And with what treatment? Then there's several things. What kind of, do you use pesticides? Do you want your coffee organic? Things like this. There has been a small incident here in Flanders where they increased, or they want to increase, the level that certain pesticides can be in our drinking water. So that's of course then a consequence of using certain treatments for your soil and getting crops with a certain yield, and then you could also affect other parts of your economy, or drive people to the hospital, having to spend money there, basically. So we're getting a little bit off track, but let's try and get through this paragraph. So what will give us the greatest profits? Knowing, for example, the right way of stocking horses or cattle or sheep or any other kind of farm stock. We need experience to tell how different breeds compare with one another in point of profit, or what breeds are most profitable on what sorts of soil. For some breeds thrive on one sort of soil and some on another sort. Other useful parts of the art of acquisition are experience in cultivation, not only of corn land, but also of land planted with vines and olives, experience in beekeeping, and experience in the rearing of such fish and fowl as may help to provide subsistence. Of course, just as a side note, Aristotle is actually the first academic freediver, also studying the life of fish, so that might just be one of the reasons he's also giving this as an example. These are the parts and the original elements of the art of acquisition in its most proper form. So this is really most basic level of how you acquire things to survive. We need food, and you have the hunting element, right? Also fishing, but then you have working on the land. These are the parts and the original elements of the art in its most proper form. We now come to exchange, because as an individual, as a household, you might have chosen to grow crops, but you need different things and you kind of need to specialize. This includes first and foremost commerce, which is divided into the three operations of the provision of a ship, the carriage of freight, and offering for sale operations, which differ from one another in the sense that some have a greater margin of safety and others a greater margin of profit. It's funny how actually for the work on coffee we're doing, and we're also working on a project for the coffee for the garden, where we also need to figure out having these containers being shipped from ideally Africa. And I say ideally because we have a responsibility as the botanic garden is a consequence, you could say, or a product of the colonization of Central Africa, in particular Congo and Rwanda, by the Belgians. I wasn't born, but still, there's a responsibility given the difficulties that they still have, and that being a direct consequence of, you know, the actions that our forebears were basically undertaking there. So that's why for the garden coffee, well, not just considering, we actually have coffee growing in partnership, of course. Well, they're grown by people in Congo, and we would buy the coffee and offer it at the garden. This is, I mean, this is not my plan. This is what coffee researchers at Mice Botanic Garden are actually planning. But up to the point that there's sufficient yields of the crops to be able to offer it at the visitors, we might also be working with other coffees. And of course, as employees, we're also drinking coffee on a daily basis. So we need some kind of coffee anyways. So probably Robusta, as we seem to be promoting that a lot. So actually, now I got my okay, so we had the freight and offering for sale operations, which differ from one another in the sense that some have a greater margin of safety and others a greater margin of profit. So it's all about, you know, what kind of margins are you looking for the services you're offering in this commerce domain. It includes, in the second place, investment at interest, and it also includes, in the third place, service for hire. This last part of exchange is partly a matter of skilled craftsmen in the mechanical arts and partly of unskilled workers who can render only the service of bodily labor. A third form of the art of acquisition is a form intermediate between the first and second, for it possesses elements both of the first or natural form and of the form which consists in exchange, which you need because you cannot do everything, right? It is concerned with things extracted from the earth or with products of the earth which bear no fruit but are still of use, and we may thus cite as examples lumbering and all forms of mining. Okay, I was confused here. I thought he was talking about interest, but he's talking about mining, which is in between growing life on the soil, and mining, you're basically extracting richness from the soil. Mining in its turn has many forms because there are many species of metals extracted from the earth. And this actually brings us back to the crop or coffee source investigations, which do actually relate to the metals that we're analyzing as a proxy for the soil that it is growing on. So we now just went through one paragraph, and reason why he's so down to earth, and that's when you, like me, you go to university and 5 years of studying philosophy, not knowing what kind of art of acquisition it would create for me, but doing that for my own personal development. But you study many different philosophers, some of whom are, let's say, more with their heads in the clouds. A Plato for one, that's why he's pointing up. And then Aristotle, he's just really down to earth with very practical advice. Specifically, try to stay in the middle. Don't go to the extremes. So this was really why I want to start this sub-series. It's like, don't go to the extremes. And we know that the people in the middle are most, but somehow they get overshadowed by, when the extremes grow, it seems like the middle is disappearing, but the middle is still there. Most people want to have a nice society to live together in their polis. And of course, what's challenging is back in Aristotle's time, to have self-sufficiency as a city-state, you could even get away by, not even trading with other city-states, and really being self-sufficient with the agriculture you could do around your city-state. Of course, that gets, I guess, a little bit boring. You want to have other kinds of goods or minerals that are extracted in different regions, so then, you start having commerce. But that self-sufficiency kind of stayed a theoretical possibility back then, definitely a lot more than it is now. And also from a constitutional point of view, all the city-states were really a lot more sovereign than a city is in any case now. So we get this very different level. And you could say that because of climate change and the fact that, drill baby drill has an impact on me and you, right? So the polis, there's this global polis, global politics level that affects everyone, and so no one should be in a position of just by themselves deciding what the world should look like. Definitely not one person or just two people or three people. That's something that's it's our right as world citizens, being part of the world polis, I would say. So there's just, I would personally love the most just doing one paragraph an episode and probably finish this work by the year of 2100 if I'm still alive and if I'm still making videos on YouTube. But at the very least, I wanted to share this first thing, so where the crematistica, or the art of acquisition, is really properly discussed in this book. And so crema, actually it means richness. So to come back to, sometimes you hear a discussion on espresso, they called it crema, it was a marketing trick. But no, crema means, it could be cream in Italian, right? But it also comes from Greek, richness. And that layer of crema on top of your espresso is really just saying, this is full of richness. Has been a work of art giving you a perfect espresso with a nice crema on top for you to enjoy. So that's a different interpretation to La Crematissima. This is quite a peculiar sub-series, so if you've followed my reasoning all up to this point, many thanks, and hope to see you on a next episode.